Forest Keepers. Hazard level B, they take 30 hits to kill, they will insta-kill you, they have a max spawn of 3 and are most commonly found on Vow. Forest Keepers have 3 phases: roaming, chasing, and searching. When a Forest Keeper first spawns, it'll climb out of the ground, then enter its roaming phase. Giants have a field of view of 50 and can see 70 meters away. Shout out to Addy for this field of view visual that you'll be seeing throughout the entire video. I've already explained this phase in my Jester video, but I will be explaining it again because there's a small mechanic that makes Forest Keepers a little different, and I will be clarifying search width, which isn't something I've covered yet. As you can see, there are small spheres placed around the entire outdoor map. These are called nodes, and it's what giants use when they're roaming. When a giant first spawns, it will choose the closest node and walk towards it. Once the giant gets close enough, it will check that node off, choose another node, and do the same. It will continue to do this process until it spots a player. Keep in mind the giant will not target a node that has already been checked off unless this phase is reset. In this phase, giants have a function that causes them to stop and look around. This function has a random chance of happening once the giant reaches a node. Giants have a search precision of 8 meters, which just means that once a giant is 8 meters away from its targeted node, it will consider the node searched and check it off. There also is a pattern behind how the giant targets nodes. Giants will always have a current target and a queued target. The current target is shown in yellow and the queued target is shown in blue. When a giant checks off its current targeted node, it will queue up the next closest node. So in this example, you can see the giant's current target is this node here. Once the giant checks this node off, it will queue up this node because it is the closest node to the one it just checked off. Eventually, this creates a path where the giant will walk back and forth. There is another mechanic in this phase called search width. Giants have a search width of 200 meters, which just means that they can only locate nodes within that range. 200 meters pretty much covers every node outside, but this will change in phase 3, which is why it's important. As soon as a player enters a Forest Keeper's field of view, this will activate their suspicion meter. Each Forest Keeper has their own suspicion meter for each player. There are 4 variables that come into play with the suspicion meter: time, distance, stance, and movement. For every second you're standing in line of sight of the giant, your suspicion meter will be rising. The closer you are, the faster the meter will rise, so if you're all the way back here, it will rise much slower than if you're standing right in front of the giant. The last 2 important variables are stance and movement, which work as multipliers. Crouching will increase your suspicion meter 1 times faster, standing will increase your suspicion meter 2 times faster, and moving will add 1 to these multipliers, so if you're crouching and moving, it'll be 2 times faster, and if you're standing and moving, it will be 3 times faster. Just to clarify, there's no difference between walking and sprinting, they're both considered moving. Every player's suspicion meter begins at 0. As soon as your suspicion meter reaches 1, the giant will chase you. Huge shout out to EchoProgram for creating this adjustable graph where we can see exactly how long it takes for your suspicion meter to reach 1. I'm linking this in the description if you'd like to check it out while I show you how it works. X represents distance, which goes up to 70 since that's how far giants can see, and Y represents how many seconds it will take before your suspicion meter is equal to 1. The only variable you want to play with here is S, which represents stance. As I explained before, crouching is equal to 1, standing is equal to 2, and moving is equal to +1. So if I put S equal to 1, that means I'm crouching and not moving. I can scroll along this line and see how long it would take until my suspicion meter reaches 1 at each distance. At, let's say, 50 meters, it would take 10.5 seconds. Now, let's say I'm full sprinting at the same distance. I would change S equal to 3, and now I can see it would take 3.5 seconds before my suspicion meter equals 1. If I close function 5 and open function 1, here I can find out exactly how much my suspicion meter is increasing per second. If I want to check how much it rises while I'm crouching and not moving, I'll change S back to 1, and if we check, let's say 50 meters again, we can see that my suspicion meter is increasing 0.095 per second. So in game, if I'm 50 meters away, crouched and not moving, my suspicion meter rises 0.095 every second that I'm in line of sight of the giant. As soon as my suspicion meter hits 1, the giant will enter his chasing phase. When a giant is in his chasing phase, it will immediately begin sprinting towards the targeted player. In this phase, as long as you're sprinting, you're much faster than the giant, up to about 35 pounds, so if you're carrying items, I suggest dropping them. During this phase, your suspicion meter is still active, and as long as the giant is able to see you, your meter is still rising. The suspicion meter has another feature that I haven't mentioned yet. As long as at least one player is in the giant's field of view, every other player's suspicion meter is decreasing 0.33 per second. Going back to my previous example, every second my suspicion meter rises, all of my teammates' suspicion meters are decreasing 0.33. Since my teammates' suspicion meters are in the negatives, it will take this giant much longer to aggro onto them. Remember that each giant has a suspicion meter for each player, so if a new giant were to spawn, everyone's suspicion meter would start at 0 for that specific giant. If a giant is chasing you, the only way to get him to lose you is to break line of sight for 3 seconds. Since giants are most commonly found on march, I suggest using trees to hide from them, but you can use pretty much any objects outside. This includes the ship, which is very useful. If the giant doesn't spot you after 3 seconds, he will enter his final phase. When a giant enters its searching phase, it will start a 9-second timer. During this timer, the giant will be non-stop sprinting and use the standard roaming function. However, his search precision increases to 15 and his search width decreases to 25. Since the giant's search precision is higher, this allows him to check nodes off much sooner. Since the forest giant's search width is only 25, he can only see nodes within this range. If the giant has checked all nodes within this range, then all nodes will reset. This forces the giant to have a kind of patrolling effect around one area. If a giant doesn't spot you or any suspicious enough players, it will go back into phase 1. If a giant manages to catch up to you, he will grab you and eat you. This animation lasts about 5 seconds, and there are ways you can get out of it. If a giant is stunned by a zap gun, radar booster, or stun grenade, he will drop whatever player he's holding. Radar boosters and stun grenades will stun the giant for 9 seconds. Be careful if you're the one who stunned or zapped him, because he will track you the entire time he's stunned, which increases your suspicion meter, and then will immediately target you once the effect has worn off. If you teleport a player right when they get grabbed, they will teleport back to ship before getting killed. This is useful if a giant is camping your ship, because you can have one player bait the giant far away and have a terminal guy teleport this player right when they get grabbed. Just for some general information, giants cannot hear you, they can only see you. If you happen to be standing on the giant while he's spawning, he will grab you and kill you right away. If a giant touches you at any moment, even if he wasn't chasing you, he will grab you and kill you. And if you're killed by a giant, you and your items will completely disappear. There are a few different ways you can kill the forest giant. The easiest way is to hit it with a shovel, stop sign, or yield sign 30 times. You can shoot it 6 times with a shotgun. If you get lucky enough to hit a giant with an exploding Easter egg, this will burn him to death. You can kill him with a kitchen knife, and my personal favorite, death by earthworm. We are about to hit 30,000 subscribers. You guys have been going crazy. Keep it up. I'm gonna start streaming next week on Twitch. Go follow me. First link in the description.